Veltar Kix stood before the young cadets at the Galactic Defense Academy. His 4 arms moved slowly as he spoke, and his crystal eyes looked far away. The old Catherian warrior had scars across his blue skin. Each scar told a story from the war with humans 50 years ago. "You think you know about war," Veltar said to the students. "You have read books. You have run training programs. But you do not know humans. I fought them for 10 years. I learned things that still wake me up at night." The classroom was quiet. Young aliens from many worlds sat and listened. They had heard stories about the human war, but Veltar had been there. He had seen it with his own eyes. "The first thing you must understand," Veltar continued, "is that we thought humans were weak. They had only 3 small colonies. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were simple. We had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. How could these new creatures challenge us?" Veltar walked to a large screen on the wall. Pictures appeared, showing human ships and bases from 50 years ago. They looked basic compared to Catherian technology. I was a young officer then. My job was to watch human supply lines. It seemed easy. Cut their supplies, and they would give up. That is how war works. But humans do not follow normal rules. The old veteran paused. He remembered his first real look at human operations. It still confused him. The human in charge of supplies was Commander Lee Minho. I watched him for months before I understood what he was doing. At first, it looked like madness. Veltar showed the cadets a map of space. Red lines showed Catherian supply routes. They were straight and simple. Blue lines showed human routes. They twisted and curved in strange ways. "Look at this," Veltar pointed to the screen. Our supply ships went from base to base in straight lines, fast and easy, but human supply ships went everywhere. They stopped at places that made no sense. They picked up things they did not need. They dropped off supplies at empty space stations. A young cadet raised her hand. Why did they waste time and fuel? Veltar's eyes glowed brighter. This was the question he had asked himself 50 years ago. I thought it was waste too, but I was wrong. Commander Minho was not just moving supplies. He was building something bigger. The screen changed to show a battle near a human colony called New Sol. Catherian ships surrounded the planet. Humans should have run out of food and ammunition in days. We cut all the normal supply routes to New Sol. We destroyed their main supply depot. We captured their cargo ships. The humans were trapped. They should have surrendered. Veltar's voice got quieter. The cadets leaned forward to hear him. But the supplies kept coming. Food arrived from nowhere. New weapons appeared overnight. Fresh troops came through routes we did not know existed. The screen showed dozens of small ships approaching New Sol. They came from all directions. Some were human ships, but many were not. Commander Minho had made deals with 47 different alien species. He had created backup routes through 17 different systems. He had hidden supply depots in asteroids, on dead moons, even inside gas giants. A cadet from the back row spoke up. How is that possible? Making deals with so many species would take years. Exactly, Veltar nodded. That is what we learned. Humans do not start planning when war begins. They start planning before anyone knows there will be a war. Veltar brought up records from human communications. The translations appeared on the screen. Look at these messages. This one is from 2 years before we first met humans. Commander Minho is already talking about potential supply challenges in unknown space. This message is from 1 year before first contact. He is making friends with traitor species we had never heard of. The old warrior touched one of his scars. It was from a human weapon that should not have existed on that battlefield. The worst part was the coffee, Veltar said. Some cadets looked confused. Coffee is a human drink. It is hot and bitter. Humans drink it to stay awake. During the battle for New Sol, we intercepted human communications. Do you know what they were complaining about? The cadets shook their heads. The coffee was getting cold during delivery. Not that they were hungry. Not that they were running out of ammunition. The coffee was not hot enough. Veltar let this sink in. The cadets looked at each other with wide eyes. We were fighting for our lives, using everything we had. The humans were upset about cold coffee. That was when I realized we were not fighting. The same war. The screen showed more human supply operations. Hundreds of ships moved in perfect coordination. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to carry. Commander Mino did not just plan for one battle or one war. He planned for wars that might happen in the future. He built supply networks that could support human operations anywhere in the galaxy. Veltar showed the cadets a picture of a small human base on an asteroid. It looked empty and useless. This base was built 3 years before we attacked the Centauri system. We thought it was abandoned. But when the battle started, it became a major supply hub. Thousands of tons of equipment came from this empty asteroid. A cadet asked, how did they know where to put it? They did not know, Veltar replied. That is the terrifying part. They built hundreds of these bases everywhere. Most were never used, but a few were in exactly the right place when war came. The old veteran walked back to the center of the room. His 4 arms gestured at the star maps around them. We Catherians are proud of our military tradition. We have conquered many worlds. We plan our battles carefully, but we plan for months, maybe years. Veltar's voice became very serious. Humans plan for generations. Commander Mino had plans for his grandchildren's wars. He created supply systems that would work for conflicts he would never see. The screen showed the final battle of the war. Human and Catherian fleets faced each other near Earth's moon. By the end, we realized something horrible. Every battle we had won, every supply line we had cut, every strategy we had used, humans had planned for all of it. They had backups for their backups. Veltar looked at each cadet in turn. Commander Mino never fired a shot in the war. He never commanded a warship, but he won more battles than any general. He defeated us with spreadsheets and shipping schedules. The old warrior smiled, but it was not a happy smile. The last message we intercepted from human forces was a supply request. They wanted more coffee and some birthday cake for a soldier's party. We were retreating from their space, and they were planning a birthday party. Veltar turned off the screen. The classroom was completely silent. Young cadets, remember this lesson. Humans do not just fight wars. They make war into a science. They turn destruction into a business operation. And they are very, very good at business. The old veteran's crystal eyes grew dim as he remembered those terrible days. We learned that day that humans do not just fight wars. They industrialize them. And once a human war machine starts running, nothing in the galaxy can stop it. Veltar Kix moved to the next lesson. The old Catherian's crystal eyes grew darker as he remembered harder times. The young cadets sat quietly, waiting for him to speak. The second story I will tell you is about Captain Park Jiho and Lieutenant Kim Yuna. This story happened on a mining world called Kepler 442b. It is not a story about victory. It is a story about how humans count the cost of everything. The screen showed a brown, dusty planet. Small buildings and mining equipment sat scattered across the surface. It looked peaceful and empty. Kepler 442b had valuable minerals that both humans and Catherians needed. When war started, there were only 300 human miners and soldiers on the planet. We sent 50,000 troops to take it. Veltar paused. The numbers seemed impossible. Any reasonable species would surrender immediately. 300 against 50,000 is not a battle. It is a massacre waiting to happen. But humans are not reasonable. The screen changed to show Captain Park Ji-ho. He was a short man with calm eyes and graying hair. He wore a simple military uniform with no decorations. Captain Park was in charge of the human garrison. When our ships arrived, he received the surrender demand. Our commander was polite. He promised to treat prisoners well. All Park had to do was give up. Veltar showed the cadets Park's response message. The translation appeared on the screen. Park replied, "Thank you for the offer. We have calculated the tactical situation. Surrender is not currently the optimal choice. We will continue operations as planned." A young cadet looked confused. Optimal choice? What did that mean? That is what our commander wondered too. Park spoke like he was discussing a business deal, not facing certain death. The screen showed the human base on Kepler 442b. It was small and simple. There were no strong walls or heavy weapons. It looked defenseless. We expected the humans to fight like warriors. We thought they would charge at us with battle cries and brave speeches. But that is not what happened. Veltar brought up a map of the planet. Red dots showed Cytherian landing zones. Blue dots showed human positions. Park divided his 300 people into small groups. He gave each group exact orders. Not fight bravely or defend with honor. He gave them numbers. The old veteran pointed to specific locations on the map. Group 1 was told to hold position Alpha for exactly 43 minutes, then retreat to position Beta. Group 2 was ordered to slow our advance by 90 seconds per kilometer. Group 3 had to destroy exactly 12 pieces of our equipment. Before falling back, a cadet asked, "Why such specific numbers?" Veltar's scars seemed to glow in the classroom light, because Captain Park had calculated exactly how much time he needed. Not to win. To delay us long enough for something else to happen. The screen showed Lieutenant Kim Yuna. She was young with bright eyes and steady hands. She wore the uniform of a combat engineer. Lieutenant Kim was Park's mathematics specialist. While we planned our attack, she sat with computers and calculators. She figured out exactly how many lives each minute of delay would cost. Veltar showed battle recordings from that day. Human soldiers fought with strange precision. They did not charge wildly or retreat in panic. They moved like pieces in a careful game. The first attack was confusing for us. Human soldiers would fight hard for exactly the right amount of time, then retreat. They did not try to kill as many of us as possible. They tried to waste as much of our time as possible. The screen showed a narrow valley where 30 human soldiers held off 3,000 Cytherians for 2 hours. This position should have fallen in minutes. But the humans used every rock, every hill, every piece of cover perfectly. They made us advance 1 meter at a time. Veltar's voice grew quieter. Then, exactly 2 hours after the fighting started, the humans left, not because they were beaten, because their time was up. Lieutenant Kim had calculated that holding for 2 hours would delay our main advance by half a day. A cadet raised her hand, but they could not delay forever. What was the point? The old warrior touched one of his deepest scars. The point was mathematics. Captain Park was not trying to save Kepler 442b. He was trying to save the Titan system. 3 jumps away. Every hour he delayed us was 1 more hour for civilians to evacuate Titan colony. The screen showed human casualty reports. The numbers were precise and cold. After each fight, Park would send reports to Earth Command. Lost 12 soldiers at Hill 47. Delayed enemy advance by 3 hours and 27 minutes. Casualties. Within acceptable parameters, Veltar let the words hang in the air. The cadets looked uncomfortable. Acceptable parameters. That is what they called their friends dying. Numbers in a calculation. The battle recordings continued. Human soldiers volunteered for missions they knew would kill them. But they did not act like heroes or martyrs. I watched Lieutenant Kim assign soldiers to a position that had no escape route. She told them exactly how long they needed to hold it, exactly how many of them would probably die. Then she asked for volunteers. The screen showed 20 humans raising their hands. They did not volunteer because they were brave. They volunteered because the mathematics made sense to them. 20 lives to save 2,000 civilians on Titan. The equation was simple. Veltar showed the final day of the battle. Only 50 humans were left alive. They had been pushed back to their last position near the mining center. By this time, we had lost 4,000 soldiers. Captain Park had lost 250. But he had delayed us for 18 days. The Titan evacuation was complete. A cadet asked, "What happened next?" Captain Park sent his final report. He calculated that the remaining 50 humans could delay us for 6 more hours if they fought. To the death. But those 6 hours were not needed anymore. The screen showed Park's last message to Human Command. Mission complete. Titan evacuation successful. Recommend immediate surrender of Kepler 442b garrison. No tactical advantage to further resistance. Casualty projections for continued fighting exceed acceptable parameters. Veltar paused. Even 50 years later, this memory was difficult. Park walked out under a white flag, but he did not surrender normally. He had one more calculation to share. The screen showed Captain Park meeting with the Catherian commander. The 2 officers stood in the dusty ground between their forces. Park gave our commander the coordinates for orbital bombardment of the human base. He had calculated that destroying the base would prevent us from using it as a supply depot. This would slow our next attack by 2 weeks. The cadets looked confused. He was asking us to bomb his own people. Not asking, Veltar corrected, recommending. From a tactical standpoint, Park explained, destroying the base was the logical choice for both sides. The old veteran's voice became very quiet. Then Park walked back to his base. He gathered his remaining soldiers and explained the situation. The mathematics said they should all die to deny us the base. The soldiers nodded and took their positions. Veltar showed the final moments of the battle. Human soldiers stood calmly at their posts as Catherian ships prepared to fire from orbit. Captain Park's final transmission was not a battle cry or a message of defiance. It was a correction to his calculations. Estimate 6 hours delay was optimistic. Recommend revising to 5 hours and 43 minutes for future planning. The screen went dark. The classroom was completely silent. Lieutenant Kim died at her computer, still calculating firing solutions for weapons that had no ammunition. Captain Park died, confirming coordinates for the bombardment that would kill him. Veltar looked at each cadet. We won the battle for Kepler 442b, but we learned something terrible that day. Humans do not just accept death in war, they optimize it. They make dying into a science. The old warrior's crystal eyes glowed with old pain. Most species fight until they cannot fight anymore. Then they surrender or retreat. Humans fight until the mathematics say they should stop. Then they die exactly when the equation tells them to. Veltar turned away from the cadets. We killed 300 humans on Kepler 442b, but those 300 saved thousands of others. And they did it not with heroic sacrifice, but with cold, precise calculation. The old veteran faced the class again. That was when we realized something horrible about humans. They do not just count the cost of war, they pay it exactly down to the last life. No more, no less than the mathematics require. Veltar's voice dropped to a whisper. They did not die heroically. They died efficiently. And somehow, that was much more frightening than any battle cry or last stand could ever be. Veltar Kix stood quietly for a moment. The weight of old memories showed on his blue face. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different kind of confusion. The third story is the strangest of all. It is about Major Song Hyen and Medic Choi. Suki, this happened during the siege of Arcturus Station. It is a story about how humans follow rules that make no sense. The screen showed a large space station orbiting a gas giant. The station had thick metal walls and powerful weapons. It looked like a fortress built in space. Arcturus Station controlled the main shipping routes through the Vega sector. If we took it, we could cut human supply lines to 12 colonies. The station had 5,000 human defenders. We attacked with 30,000 troops. Veltar brought up pictures of the battle. Cytherian ships surrounded the station while explosions flashed in the darkness of space. The siege lasted 4 months. We slowly pushed the humans back, level by level. They fought hard, but we were winning. That was when we learned about human rules. The screen showed Major Song Hyen. He was a tall man with serious eyes and gray hair at his temples. His uniform was clean despite the battle raging around him. Major Song commanded the human defenders. In the 3rd month of the siege, his troops captured 43 Cytherian soldiers. We expected them to be killed or used as shields. That is how war works. Veltar paused, remembering his confusion from that day. Instead, Major Song put the prisoners in the station's safest area. He gave them clean clothes, hot food, and medical care. His own soldiers were eating emergency rations, but the prisoners got fresh meals. A young cadet looked puzzled. Why would they waste resources on enemies? That is exactly what we wondered. Our prisoners were being treated better than human soldiers. It made no tactical sense. The screen showed the prison area on Arcturus Station. Cytherian prisoners sat in comfortable rooms. Human guards brought them books and games to pass the time. We thought it was a trick. Maybe Song was trying to make use fight less hard to avoid being captured. But that was not the reason. Veltar brought up a document on the screen. It was covered with human writing in many different languages. Major Song showed our prisoners this document. He called it the Geneva Conventions. It was a list of rules about how to treat prisoners during war. The old veteran's crystal eyes reflected his continuing confusion. The rules were very detailed. Prisoners must have clean water and food. They cannot be forced to give information. They must receive medical care. They have the right to send messages to their families. A cadet asked who made these rules. Humans made them for themselves. The rules only applied to human forces. We Cytherians never agreed to follow these rules. But humans followed them anyway. The screen showed Medic Choi Suki. She was a small woman with gentle eyes and steady hands. Her medical uniform was stained with blood from both human and Cytherian soldiers. Medic Choi ran the station's hospital. She treated wounded prisoners the same as wounded humans. When we captured some of her supply drops, we found medical records. She was using medicine on Cytherian prisoners that her own troops needed. Veltar showed battlefield recordings. Human medics ran into danger to help wounded Cytherians, even while the battle continued around them. This was insane. Medic Choi would risk human lives to save Cytherian lives. She would use her last bottle of medicine on an enemy soldier while human soldiers waited for treatment. The old warrior touched a scar on his neck. I was wounded in the fighting and captured by Song's troops. I thought they would torture me for information about our plans. Instead, they put me in the prison section and gave me a warm meal. Veltar's voice became quiet with memory. Major Song visited me personally. He said he was sorry I had been wounded. He asked if I needed anything to be comfortable. I thought he was mocking me. The screen showed the prison interview rooms. They looked more like offices than interrogation chambers. Song asked me questions about our troop movements and weapons. When I refused to answer, he nodded and said that was my right under the Geneva Conventions. Then he offered me tea. A cadet looked confused. He just accepted that you would not help him? More than accepted it. He seemed to respect it. Song said that soldiers should not be forced to betray their own side. He said the Geneva Conventions protected my right to remain silent. Veltar showed documents from the human archives. They were requests for supplies signed by Major Song. Look at these requisition forms. Song requested extra food, medicine, and blankets for prisoners. His own troops were sleeping in cold corridors, but he wanted the prisoners to have warm beds. The screen changed to show a meeting between Song and his officers. The humans looked tired and frustrated. Song's own commanders argued with him. They said the prisoners were using resources that human soldiers needed. Song's reply was always the same. The Geneva Conventions are not suggestions. They are requirements. Veltar brought up medical records from the station's hospital. Medic Choi kept detailed records of her treatments. She performed surgery on wounded Kitherian prisoners while human soldiers waited in pain. When her officers complained, she quoted human medical ethics. The old veteran showed a video message from Choi to our family on Earth. In this recording, Choi explains to her children why she saves enemy lives. She says that humans must remain human even in war. If they stop following their moral rules, they become no better than animals. A cadet asked, "But what about winning the war? Did they not want to defeat you?" Veltar's expression grew thoughtful. That is the terrifying part. They did want to win, but they wanted to win while staying human. They would rather lose than break their own moral code. The screen showed the final days of the siege. Human defenses were failing, and Kitherian troops were advancing through the station. When it became clear that Arcturus Station would fall, Major Song made a decision that still confuses me. He released all Kitherian prisoners. Veltar showed security footage of the prison section. Human guards opened cells and led Kitherian prisoners to escape pods. Song gave us medical supplies, food, and safe passage back to our lines. He knew we would rejoin the fight against him. He knew some of us might kill his soldiers in future battles. The old warrior's voice carried deep puzzlement. When I asked Song why he was freeing us, he showed me the Geneva Conventions again. He said the rules required him to return prisoners safely when possible. The screen showed Song's final message to human command. Arcturus Station will fall within 6 hours. All prisoners have been released per Geneva Convention requirements. Recommend evacuation of non-essential personnel. We will continue to hold position as long as tactically viable. Veltar turned to face the cadets directly. Major Song and Medic Choi died defending Arcturus Station. They followed their moral rules right up to the end, even when those rules made victory harder. The old veteran's crystal eyes glowed with an emotion the cadets could not identify. We took Arcturus Station, but we learned something that night. Humans do not just fight for territory or resources. They fight for the right to remain human. Veltar showed pictures of the destroyed station. Human and Kitherian bodies floated in the wreckage. Song and Choi could have won the battle if they had ignored their Geneva Conventions. They could have used prisoners as shields. They could have tortured captured soldiers for information. They could have used their medical supplies only on human troops. The old warrior paused. But they chose to lose rather than break their moral code. They chose to die rather than compromise who they were. Veltar's voice became very quiet. That was when we realized We were not fighting for the same things. We were fighting to expand our empire. Humans were fighting for the right to remain, moral in an immoral situation. The screen went dark, leaving only Veltar's glowing eyes visible in the classroom. How do you defeat an enemy that would rather lose than compromise their values? How do you break people who become stronger by following rules that make them weaker? The old veteran looked at each cadet in turn. Major Song and Medic Choi showed. Use that humans have something more dangerous than any weapon. They have principles they will not break, no matter the cost. Veltar's voice dropped to a whisper. And somehow, following those principles made them more terrifying than any army we had ever faced. Because we realized they were not just fighting for victory. They were fighting for the right to remain human, and that is a war they could never lose. Veltar Kix moved to the center of the classroom. His forearms gestured slowly as he prepared to tell the most difficult story of all. The old Kitherian's crystal eyes seemed to look through time itself. The fourth story is about Admiral Kong. Taiwan and Dr. Jin Yunbi. This story is not about a single battle or a moment of sacrifice. It is about something much more frightening. It is about how humans think in centuries, while the rest of us think in years. The screen showed Earth's solar system 50 years ago. Human ships moved between planets and asteroid mining stations. Everything looked normal and peaceful. When war began, we studied human civilization. They had only been in space for 100 years. We Kitherians had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. We thought experience would give us easy victory. Veltar brought up intelligence reports from the early war period. The documents showed Kitherian analysis of human capabilities. Our experts calculated that humans could fight for maybe 5 years before their economy collapsed. Their technology was generations behind ours. Their population was tiny compared to the Kitherian Empire. The old veteran paused, remembering the confidence they had felt. We planned a quick war. Capture their colonies, destroy their fleets, force them to surrender. Then we would add human space to our empire. It should have taken 2 years at most. The screen showed Admiral Kong Taiwan. He was an elderly man with white hair and calm, patient eyes. His uniform was simple, with few decorations. Admiral Kong commanded human naval forces, but he spent most of his time in meetings, not on warships. He talked to scientists, engineers, economists, and teachers. We thought he was wasting time. Veltar showed meeting records from human archives. Thousands of documents detailed plans and projects that made no immediate sense. Look at these project names: Century Fleet Development Program, Generational, Technology Initiative, Long-Term Colonial Expansion Framework. These were not plans for the current war. These were plans for wars that might happen in the future. A young cadet looked confused, but they were already fighting a war. Why plan for future wars? The old warrior's expression grew troubled, because Admiral Kong was not just planning to survive the current war. He was planning for human civilization to survive for the next 1,000 years. The screen showed Dr. Jin Yunbi. She was a middle-aged woman with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. Her laboratory was filled with books, computers, and strange experimental equipment. Dr. Jin ran human education and research programs. While battles raged across space, she was building schools and universities. She was training children who would not be old enough to fight for 20 years. Veltar brought up curriculum documents from human schools during the war. Dr. Jin created new classes for human children: advanced mathematics, spatial engineering, xenobiology, diplomatic theory. These children were learning skills for jobs that did not exist yet. The screen showed human children in classrooms studying star charts and alien languages. We intercepted some of these lesson plans. Human children were learning about Kitherian culture, history, and technology. Not to fight us better, but to understand us better. A cadet asked, "Understand you for what purpose?" Veltar's crystal eyes dimmed with the memory. For the peace that would come after the war. Dr. Jin was preparing human children to live and work with Githerians 50 years. In the future, the old veteran showed documents that still made no sense to him. Admiral Kang approved funding for research projects that would take 30 years to complete. He ordered the construction of shipyards that would not be finished until after the war ended. He signed contracts for ore deliveries scheduled for the year 2087. The screen displayed a massive construction project on the edge of human space. This is Shipyard Complex Omega-7. Admiral Kang started building it in the second year of the war. It would take 25 years to complete and cost more than the entire human military budget. Veltar let this information settle with the cadets. While we were fighting battles, Admiral Kang was building the infrastructure for the next century of human expansion. He was not just trying to win the current war. He was positioning humanity to dominate the galaxy for generations. The screen showed research laboratories where human scientists worked on seemingly impossible projects. Dr. Jin's researchers were developing technologies that would not be practical for decades. Faster-than-light communication, artificial gravity, planetary engineering. They spent precious resources on ideas that could not help the current war. Effort. A cadet raised her hand. But how could they afford to waste resources on the future when they were losing the present? Veltar's expression grew darker. That is what we thought too. But we were wrong about who was losing. The screen changed to show battle statistics from the middle years of the war. The numbers looked bad for humanity. By year 6, humans had lost half their colonies. Their fleets were scattered. Their economy was struggling. Every reasonable analysis said they were defeated. The old warrior touched one of his scars. But then strange things started happening. Human ships appeared with new technologies that should not have existed. Their soldiers carried weapons that were decades ahead of anything we had seen. Veltar showed captured human equipment from later in the war. The technology was far more advanced than early human designs. We realized that Admiral Kang's research projects were not for the future. They were for the present. He had been developing new technologies throughout the war, waiting for the right moment to use them. The screen displayed a timeline of human technological development during the war. Look at this pattern. Every major human breakthrough happened exactly when they needed it most. New shield technology appeared just as we developed better weapons. Faster engines were deployed right before a major offensive. Better communications came online, just as we tried to isolate their fleets. A cadet looked amazed. They planned when their own inventions would be ready? More than that, Veltar replied. They planned when we would need to be defeated by those inventions. The old veteran brought up intercepted human communications from Admiral Kang's staff. These messages show something incredible. Admiral Kang knew in year 2 exactly what technologies he would need in year 8. Dr. Jin was training scientists in year 1 for research they would conduct in year 7. The screen showed the famous Battle of Wolf 359, where human forces achieved their first major victory. This battle was the turning point of the war. Human forces used 17 different new technologies that had never been seen before. We thought they had made some desperate breakthrough. Veltar's voice grew quiet with awe. Later, we captured Admiral Kang's planning documents. The Battle of Wolf 359 was scheduled for that exact date in his plans from year 1 of the war. He had been preparing for that specific battle for 7 years. The cadets sat in stunned silence. Every human defeat, every retreat, every loss, it was all part of a plan that covered the entire war from beginning to end. The screen showed Dr. Jin's educational programs reaching full implementation. By year 9, Dr. Jin's students were graduating and joining the human military. These young humans had been trained from childhood for this specific war. They knew our language, our tactics, our culture better than most Cytherians. Veltar brought up the final battle records. When peace negotiations began, the human delegation included philosophers, economists, engineers, and teachers. Our delegation was all military officers. We came prepared to discuss surrender terms. They came prepared to design the next 1,000 years of galactic civilization. The old warrior's expression showed deep respect mixed with fear. Admiral Kang died 2 years before the war ended. Dr. Jin lived to see peace, but she died shortly after. Neither of them saw their plans come to full completion. The screen showed modern human space. Hundreds of colonies spread across dozens of star systems. Human and Cytherian ships work together in joint operations. But their work continues. The schools Dr. Jin built are still training human children. The technologies Admiral Kang developed are still being implemented. The infrastructure they planned is still being built. Veltar looked directly at the cadets. We were fighting a 10-year war. Humans were fighting a 1,000-year expansion. We were trying to win battles. They were trying to reshape the galaxy. The old veteran's voice became very quiet. The most terrifying thing about Admiral Kang and Dr. Jin was not their intelligence or their planning. It was their patience. They could start projects they would never finish for the benefit of humans not yet born. Veltar's crystal eyes glowed with the weight of understanding. We realized that every human action for 50 years had been part of a single, coordinated strategy, including their apparent defeats, including their willingness to make peace with us. The screen went dark, leaving only the old warrior's glowing eyes. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right to guide galactic civilization for the next millennium. And they won that fight before we even knew it had begun. Veltar Kix stood at the front of the classroom for the final time. His 4 arms hung at his sides, and his crystal eyes reflected 50 years of memories. The old Cytherian warrior looked tired, but also strangely peaceful. The last story is the most important one. It is about Ambassador Ru Dong-yuk and Engineer Wan Nari. This story happened after the fighting ended, during the peace negotiations. It is about the most terrifying human trait of all. The screen showed a conference room on the neutral station at Proxima Centauri. Human and Cytherian delegates sat across from each other at a long table. The atmosphere looked tense and formal. By year 10, both sides were exhausted. We had lost millions of soldiers. Our economy was struggling. Human colonies were in ruins. It was time to end the war. Veltar brought up intelligence reports from the final months of fighting. The numbers showed massive casualties and destruction on both sides. Our military leaders expected standard peace negotiations. Humans would demand reparations for their destroyed colonies. We would demand territory as compensation for our losses. There would be prisoner exchanges, border agreements, trade restrictions. The old veteran paused, remembering his confusion from those days. Ambassador Ru led the human peace delegation. He was a quiet man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had lost 2 sons in the war. We expected him to be angry and demanding. The screen showed Ambassador Ru Dong-yuk. He looked like a grandfather, more than a diplomat. His clothes were simple, and he carried only a small briefcase to the negotiations. The first session began with our demands. We wanted 3 human colonies as payment for our losses. We wanted exclusive mining rights in the Vega sector. We wanted humans to limit their fleet size and stay out of certain systems. Veltar showed documents from the Cytherian negotiation team. The demands were extensive and harsh. Ambassador Ru listened to our terms without interrupting. When we finished, he nodded politely and opened his briefcase. We expected him to present counter-demands or threaten to resume fighting. The old warrior's expression grew puzzled, as if he still could not believe what happened next. Instead, Ambassador Rue presented a proposal for joint human-Catherian colony ships. He suggested shared research projects and cultural exchange programs. He proposed trade agreements that would benefit both species. A young cadet looked confused. He offered cooperation? But you had been enemies. That was exactly our reaction. Our chief negotiator asked if Ambassador Rue understood that we had been at war. Rue replied that wars end, but civilizations continue. The screen showed Engineer Juan Nari. She was a middle-aged woman with practical clothes and hands, stained with grease and metal dust. She looked more like a factory worker than a diplomat. Engineer Juan was Ambassador Rue's technical advisor. While diplomats argued about borders and reparations, she drew up plans for infrastructure projects that would span multiple star systems. Veltar brought up Juan's engineering proposals. The document showed massive construction projects involving both human and Catherian technology. Juan proposed building shipyards that could service both human and Catherian vessels. She designed communication networks that would connect all worlds in both territories. She planned joint colonies where humans and Catherians would live and work together. The old veteran touched his scars, which had faded over the decades. Our negotiators were suspicious. This had to be a trick. No species offers cooperation to enemies who killed their children. We demanded to know what humans really wanted. The screen showed Ambassador Rue's response to Catherian suspicions. Rue explained that humans had studied our species throughout the war. They understood our history, our culture, our needs. They believed that cooperation would be more profitable than continued conflict. Veltar's voice carried amazement even after 50 years. Profitable. That was the word he used. Not moral or necessary. Profitable. Ambassador Rue treated peace like a business opportunity. A cadet asked, "But what about justice? What about punishment for the war?" The old warrior's crystal eyes grew bright. That was what our delegation demanded. Justice for our dead. Punishment for human aggression. Ambassador Rue listened carefully, then asked a simple question. Will punishment bring back the dead or prevent future wars? The screen showed detailed analyses that the human delegation had prepared. Engineer Juan presented statistical studies of every major galactic conflict in recorded history. Her conclusion was clear. Punitive peace agreements always led to future wars. Cooperative agreements created lasting peace. Veltar brought up the economic projections that Juan had calculated. Juan showed us numbers that were hard to argue with. A cooperative peace would increase trade between our species by 400% within 20 years. Both human and Catherian economies would recover from the war faster through shared technology and resources. The old veteran showed footage from the negotiation sessions. Human delegates worked patiently with Catherian concerns and fears. When our delegates worried about human expansion, Ambassador Rue proposed joint expansion projects. When we feared human technology, Engineer Juan suggested shared research facilities. Every Catherian concern was met with a cooperative solution. The screen displayed the most shocking proposal of all. The humans offered to help rebuild Catherian worlds that had been damaged in the war, not as reparations they owed us, but as investment in future partnerships. A cadet looked amazed. They offered to help rebuild enemy worlds? More than help. Pay for it. Engineer Juan had designed reconstruction projects that would employ both human and Catherian workers. The rebuilding would create jobs, develop new technologies, and train both species to work together. Veltar's voice grew quiet with memory. Our military commanders were outraged. They said humans were trying to conquer us with kindness instead of weapons. They demanded traditional victory terms. The screen showed Ambassador Rue's response to Catherian military concerns. Rue agreed that humans could demand traditional victory terms. They had won the war, after all. But he asked our commanders to consider the mathematics of the situation. The old warrior brought up the calculations that had changed everything. One presented cost analyses for different types of peace agreements. A punitive peace would cost both sides trillions of credits and thousands of lives over the next century. A cooperative peace would generate profits for everyone within a decade. Veltar showed the turning point of the negotiations. Ambassador Rue made a simple offer. Try cooperation for 10 years. If it failed, both sides could return to traditional antagonistic relationships. If it succeeded, continue the partnership. The cadets sat in stunned silence as Veltar continued. The most terrifying part was how confident the humans seemed. They were not hoping that cooperation would work. They were certain it would work. They had planned for this peace just as carefully as they had planned for the war. The screen showed the final peace treaty signing ceremony. Human and Catherian leaders stood together, shaking hands and sharing ceremonial drinks. The Treaty of Proxima was unlike any peace agreement in galactic history. No reparations, no territorial concessions, no military restrictions. Just cooperation agreements and joint projects. Veltar brought up progress reports from the years following the peace. Within 5 years, human-Catherian trade exceeded all projections. Joint colonies were thriving. Shared research projects had produced technologies that neither species could have developed alone. The old veteran's expression grew thoughtful. But the most amazing thing was not the economic success. It was how quickly former enemies became partners. Humans who had lost family members in the war worked alongside Catherians who had fought against them. The screen showed modern examples of human-Catherian cooperation. Mixed crews operated starships. Mixed teams built new colonies. Mixed families lived in integrated communities. Engineer Wan lived to see her infrastructure projects completed. The communication network she designed now connects 600 worlds. The shipyards she planned build vessels for a dozen different species. Veltar's voice carried deep respect. Ambassador. Rue died 10 years after the peace treaty. His funeral was attended by thousands of Catherians. Former enemy soldiers served as honor guards at his burial. The old warrior looked directly at the cadets. Young students, you have now heard all 5 stories about human warfare. The logistics, the sacrifice, the moral codes, the long-term planning, and the peace that followed. Valel's crystal eyes grew bright with understanding. But the most terrifying thing about humans is not any single trait. It is how all these traits work together toward a single goal. The screen showed images of the modern galaxy. Dozens of species work together in trade, exploration, and cultural exchange. Humans did not fight the war to defeat us. They fought the war to save us. From ourselves, from endless conflict, from the limitations of thinking only about our own species. The old veteran's voice dropped to a whisper. Every battle, every sacrifice, every act of mercy, every long-term plan, it was all designed to reach this moment. A galaxy where former enemies worked together for the benefit of all. Veltar looked at each cadet in turn. The most terrifying thing about humans is not their weapons, or their tactics, or their sacrifice. It is that they fight wars not to destroy their enemies, but to turn them into friends.